We take for granted in South Africa that our doctrine of law and respect for contract and just the structure within which we operate, whether it's in the financial services sector or even in government and so on, when a contract is done, it's done. In other parts of the world, a contract is never done until the money is in the bank.
So Kabelo, thanks and welcome to the Business Unusual podcast. Kabelo Makwane is you head of country for Google. Is that the way that you country director for Google? What an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. And I think there's so many things that is happening at the moment. Business is so unusual that I think we're going to have a great conversation. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Ralf. It's a pleasure to be here as well.
Yeah, I think, I looked at your journey a little bit on LinkedIn, and obviously the team did some research. And so, we got whole diagnostics, the CIA got involved, and you've had an incredible career. But maybe it's better if you tell us your story about how you got to where you are, because it is incredible.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm a simple township boy who grew up in the dusty streets then of Soweto, and a lot of what I think I learned in those early formative years has kind of stood me well. Just in terms of navigating the corporate jungle. So interestingly, my career has kind of progressed into more tech, but I actually didn't set out in the tech space. I wanted to actually get into the medical field. So after 2 years at Vets Medical School, I decided I'm too squeamish and I don't like the smell of formaldehyde on my hands. And I gave that, I hung my lab coat for the corporate world. So that's really where my journey began. And I think what really kind of pivoted me into tech was very early on, when I was working at Standard Bank, actually, in frontline customer service. Standard Bank was going through, at the time, early 90s, through a digital transformation, moving from predominantly mainframe systems. We had to memorize those command line computing with green screens and the like. In those days, there was no fuzzy GUI, graphic user interface that you can just point and click and get stuff done. It was the days of WordPerfect and command line computing. So when we were transforming the business at the time from mainframe to client PCs, client server environment, I became part of a project called the branch delivery system. And we worked on weekends to get the project over the line with a swarm of consultants, technical consultants at the time. And, even coming into to the office on the weekend to test the system, etc., it didn't feel like work. That's actually when I knew, after my short stint and aspirations of becoming a medical doctor, a GP would, kind of fundamentally shift. I was just enamored by this piece of technology in front of me, and the possibilities of what you could do with it. And it didn't feel like work. And I think I found my calling there at that time. And fast forward, I went back to school. So I studied a BCom in management information systems. I majored basically in IT. called it BCom BIS at the time, Business Information Systems and Finance. At University of Natal, Pietermaritzburg. Now it's called the UKZN.
Yeah.
So I'm revealing a little bit of my age, so don't be fooled by my.
Listen, we both are indirectly with our beards, and I mean,
and from there I kind of just progressed into that space. My first gig, probably you would have picked up. You wouldn't have seen that on my LinkedIn profile, but my first gig at formal work, post the Standard Bank, and post my BCom degree was with Eskom. So I worked for Eskom Technology Services, Eskom TSI at the time. And from then on, it just kind of progressed. I started off working for predominantly South African companies, but a lot of my career, the majority of my career is just been punctuated by American multinationals, but predominantly the likes of Microsoft, Cisco Systems, Accenture, and Google now. Actually, before joining Google, I was with Vodacom for about 5 years as well. So, yeah, it's been tech, but tech with a very strong business flavor. Because I find that the nexus of technology and how it transforms how people do business is really, really exciting. This is where all the action is, and it's a good place to be.
So all the action is. I also find it very exciting, and then I start watching All Hands by people like Elon Musk, and I realize how completely unintelligent I am trying to keep up with his conversation around robotics and AI, and I had to watch the podcast twice just to try and make sense of what he was saying. I don't know if you feel that way about watching Elon Musk talk about technology.
No, on the contrary, when I watched tech speak, especially a lot of these global leaders, I mean, they are super, super smart people. I draw a lot of inspiration, from across the board, whether it's Elon Musk or, Sundar or any of these global tech, CEOs. The age of AI has actually just made computing even more fascinating. In just not only the pace at which technology is evolving, but also just the possibilities of what human ingenuity can do with this tech. It's actually quite amazing. We actually listening to our leader from DeepMind, Google. He was talking about in the age of AI. Excuse me. In the age of AI, talking about the quest to solve for intelligence. I mean, he literally said, if you solve the intelligence equation, you'll solve a lot of problems. And that to me was quite profound, just in terms of how people think about these, big tech companies are thinking about AI and what it would do for humanity in terms of solving real world problems. And accelerating the pace of human evolution. That to me is quite inspiring.
Yeah, I think we're going to get into AI just now, and I think it's inspiring. But like anything inspiring, what we don't know, we sometimes fear because we don't know the outcomes of that stuff. Yeah. And I mean, in your career, you've moved, like you said, from great positions, and then you've sort of pushed yourself, I'd imagine, going to new opportunities. And so how do you get over these challenges personally?
Yeah, I have it was almost like innate at some point, but it's become more overt in my just my predisposition and how I think about growth. It's that whole notion of being uncomfortable with being comfortable. Whenever I get comfortable, that's when I know I should get uncomfortable. I'm not growing, there's kind of like a steady state. I don't necessarily do well with steady states. And so for me, I embrace challenge at almost every given opportunity. And that's why for most people, even when I was, back in the days when I was at Microsoft and I was doing exceptionally well, leading the public sector business, I took on the challenge to go and start a whole new Microsoft operation in West Africa when none existed as country director then. And it was a challenge of monumental proportion. I couldn't ever anticipate it.
Is there
hit me?
Any stories there that stood out? And any hits that hit you that you
there are
didn't
plenty.
expect?
There are plenty. I mean, I'll share this one story. Like it was my first day on the job, and I had a lady, who was assisting me at the time, Paula. Actually, she comes to me. I could see this really, really concerned look on her face. She comes and says, "Sir, I have something to discuss with you. It's a very serious matter, So I'm looking at her and I'm like, "What's the matter, Paula? Up with it." And then she kind of meanders around in the office, and then she's very, very respectful. She doesn't want to offend me, and then she walks away. She literally just bolts, doesn't say anything. Comes back with our head of marketing and operations, Awao, and I always says, "Sir, there's a problem with your calendar. You see all these meetings that you've lined up," and it was like back to back, with only a lunch break there. There were like 4 or 5 meetings in a day. It's not going to be possible, I said, why are you saying that? Come on, we must get the business going. He says, no, you see, sir, it takes someone coming from the island or mainland 2 hours to cross that mainland bridge to get to you. So at best, you will have 2 meetings today, not the 6 that you had planned. And so like just the realization of like infrastructure challenges and what they mean for productivity was my first aha moment, right? In how I'd been used to doing, business in South Africa versus how I needed to adjust my expectations, adjust the way we could still be effective with the constraints that existed at the time in Nigeria. So I was based out of Lagos, Nigeria, and all of those challenges, whether it was the team, the staff at the time, or partners, customers, you kind of have to navigate within those complexities. And it's not an easy thing to do, right? It's not easy.
For sure. It sort of worries me even, the thought, but I mean, you've done that. I mean, what would you say? I mean, you said at the beginning that, I suppose you navigated corporate jungle through your experience from Soweto. What was it in Soweto that taught you to navigate this corporate jungle?
Yeah, I didn't realize it at the time, but it's something that just became very well ingrained at a very early age, was just being able to sense and have very, very finely tuned system for detecting risk, first and foremost. And then secondly, also...
That sunk then. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
when it's personal safety, I suppose that counts, right?
Yeah. Also, yeah, absolutely, and also just your ability to discern. I think it's a lot sharper, right? When when navigating in sort of complex, risky sort of township environments. And it's something that has kind of stood me. My instincts and intuition, I think, just got a lot more cold growing up in very, very challenging circumstances. And that's in good stead. It stood me in very good stead, also just in business.
And so how does that play out? So how does that risk profiling play out for you? Like in your thoughts?
Yeah, and I think so. For instance, if I kind of think about coming out of my comfort zone, which was South Africa, and going to work in a different country, where I didn't know the language. B, I didn't know the culture, the people, were different. The way of doing business was different. I mean, in those days, we were talking about trying to legalize in an environment that was kind of very difficult to navigate in terms of respect for contract, respect for, if we sign a contract, we sign a contract with legal jurisprudence, stands, right? And it wasn't the case in many instances, which was why at the time the piracy rate was so high. It was sitting over 90%, right? And we were trying to legalize a society that didn't have a cultural ethos on, respect for contract. That was quite difficult. And so a lot of the dealings that you have with people are based on relationships and are based on your own, intuition about whether this is going to stand or not. You have to almost like base your entire business plan and forecast on the strength of the relationships that you have with people and how you engage with them and whether they're going to, honor the contracts that you get into with them. That taught me a very different skill set, one which was just invaluable. I wouldn't have learned otherwise. We take for granted in South Africa that our doctrine of law and respect for contract and just the structure within which we operate, whether it's in the financial services sector or even in government and so on, when a contract is done, it's done. In other parts of the world, a contract is never done until the money is in the bank, right? And at any point in time. So it's a very, very different way of navigating, and the complexities of running a business there just quadruple, actually.
And are there things that you look out for, as in, like, if someone's got this personality trait, I like avoid them? Or is there things that you navigate towards if someone's got a personality trait you think, we can do business, I got a feeling about this person? I mean, Warren Buffett talks about integrity, hard work, and intelligence. I mean, how do you find those elements when you're engaging with someone?
Yeah, those elements are things that I look out for in terms of, if you want to call it, how my brain would classify you as friend or foe in business. But truth be told, also, I don't approach engagements with people with preconceived notions. That's also something that I've learned. I've kind of learned over the years. Every engagement for me is blank slate. I actually oftentimes the proverbial wisdom is, when you're engaging with people for the first time, is to go and do online research on who they are. And there's method to that. There's wisdom in that, but there's also wisdom in not doing that and giving people the benefit of the doubt and just coming into a conversation with a fresh perspective and seeing how things unfold. And maybe then validated with research post-mortem. I've applied both approaches. And it's interesting. It's interesting how you get different results.
Because your focus is like that pattern interrupt. You suddenly have to really listen and really focus and engage with a person. Yeah. And so you're losing all those preconceived ideas and biases.
Exactly.
And I mean, there's two things. I do want to talk about bias and AI and tech, but this notion of coming from Soweto, from pivoting, doing things differently. You've worked for big multinationals overseas. There's some thinking that I sort of personally generated, which was that we do awards on South African businesses and a whole host of different areas. And I suppose I was fixated with the Harvard Business Review and publications of that sort, looking at American businesses, from the likes of from good to great methodologies. And something that sort of came across to me is that when we were looking at American companies and what they're doing and how they're doing, they almost have a perfect world. They have things, like low unemployment, ease of access to capital, low cost of capital, single language, judicial system that's strong, high education levels, like almost everything's perfect. And then I looked at some South African companies and how they perform internationally. And it's like, you look at all the challenges that we have, and you talk about this coming from Soweto and how it taught you actually to work in the corporate jungle. And I almost feel the same way with South African corporate world compared to the global community. And I'm not sure if you also felt that same way, that actually we've got a lot to be inspired about and a lot to be grateful for from the challenges that we have.
Yeah, you're spot on, Ralf. It's actually something that is also taken for granted, I believe, and that's why I think in the main, a lot of South African executives that go and take up international assignments, they do exceptionally well. It's because they've built a couple of layers of Teflon working in challenging circumstances too, in that sense, versus comparatively, Western markets or even Eastern markets for all intents and purposes sometimes. So the tenacity, the resilience, the agility that you need to be able to thrive, let alone succeed in our environment, is also character traits that actually make these executives, I believe, extremely successful.
Yeah, and from your perspective, I mean, we spoke earlier about you working with Mteto, who I highly regard, and I've watched his progress, which is unbelievable. But I mean, from your perspective, you've moved and worked in different leadership positions in multinationals and been very successful. What would you say is your leadership sort of expertise or attributes that you feel has helped you to navigate those changes and those cultures?
Yeah, the thing that's most important in any environment is clarity. The job of a leader is bringing about that clarity, and that clarity cannot come if you are unable to translate complex things. And different organizations have different types of complexities. If you're not able to, translate that complexity and make it simple for people to digest, assimilate, and then buy into, right? I think is an important thing, and it's something that certainly has helped me navigate across different organizations with different teams. And a lot of people, if you operate from the basis that people want to do good and they want to be successful, like if you use that as your first premise, and then your job is to then figure out how do you actually make them successful in the things they value the most, right? You are more than likely actually to move the business forward. So it starts with setting that vision, being clear about what the ambition is and how you then support that ambition with some key sort of anchor milestones, because also people want to feel a sense of accomplishment. So it's kind of like you have to have a start and a stop, or at least have a point where you punctuate the journey and say, okay, we've reached this milestone, and then we go to the next, and then we go to the next. When people feel like it's sort of like it's an elongated, never-ending thing. They get exhausted, and so the most simplest of things about celebrating accomplishments and milestones really motivates and fuels people to actually do more and want to achieve more. That sense of, we all need to have that sense of accomplishment, that sense of, I've reached that point, I can move on to the next thing, to the next. We are very task oriented in that sense, and completion of tasks, even the micro tasks, becomes quite pivotal in mobilizing teams. So vision clarity, setting bold ambitions, to set aspirational ambitions also is important, and then kind of creating that sort of, let's call it, journey map, and how those milestones are going to be accomplished seems to have worked. I'm not sure if it's going to work for me going forward, but yeah, it's working. The other thing that has stood me in good stead is operating from a position of authenticity. So while you set those ambitions and big milestones, etc., people gravitate when they know that they can trust in the leadership. And so my mantra has always been leading with authenticity. I found a 3-letter acronym, as with all things in the tech space now, for it as well. It's called FAB. It's not short for fabulous. It actually abbreviates, leading from the front, leading aside people, and sometimes leading from the back. So I apply the FAB model in my leadership on a daily basis.
Yeah, it's like the wolf pack, right? It's like you're in a different position at different times, so you don't have to be one singular way of working. Yeah. And I mean, talking about the celebration and looking back and checking off our achievements, and we do awards, and we see the benefit of that for organizations to reflect, and for the team, for the company. But I mean, I think one of the reasons we did the business awards is because we felt there was this culture of, again, America's better, US is better, Europe's better, and they do this celebration thing so well. They do it really well, and I think that we could do it better. What have you learned from them, the Googles, the Microsofts, the Accentures, around how they celebrate success that you've implemented?
Yeah, I think the multinationals, just in terms of ritual and rigor and how they operate, are quite similar from that perspective, from a rewards and recognition point of view. Here at Google, we have a very deeply entrenched culture of recognizing achievement, and not only is it done, let's call it top down, it's actually peer recognition as well. Peer recognition that is tied to also monetary benefits, which makes the incentive and the motivation that much more, right? Because if your peers, what we find, and this is a learning from me, is that when people in your peer group recognize you and are willing to put because they've got a finite pot of money in the year that they can divvy up and distribute to the people who have impacted them in a very positive way. And really? If they choose to spend it on you, it actually weighs 2 pounds in gold compared to if it's done by management. I think it's such an effective way of mobilizing teams to collaborate, to want to see each other be successful, as opposed to sometimes the polar opposite of that culture, which is toxic cultures where everybody's tearing each other down to get ahead. Here at Google, there's a very deeply entrenched way in which people actually succeed through collaboration, as opposed to working alone and trying to be a superstar all by themselves. So that's been a big sort of learning for me. And those peer bonuses, etc., they go a long way in fostering a culture of teamwork and collaboration and innovation as well. Just in terms of how a huge business that's operating in so many geographies can actually maintain a consistent culture of innovation.
It's so funny because I mean, you talk about these things, but I think there's a lot of when we do the top 500 best managed companies, one of the indicators is turnover per employee, and it seems like Google's got that really down. And then I think there's what's been bandied around as the first $1 billion one-person company. So is that the scale now? Are we all being held to a $1 billion productivity rate? But how important are these sort of metrics and looking at it, and things like the OKRs that I know that Google implements? How important are these sorts of things?
These things are important. I think just in terms of how you translate vision, ambition, and your strategy into kind of executable things, commercial actions, it's super important, because the simplicity and the clarity that I spoke of earlier comes through having clear OKRs, without which you create let's call it destructive tension in the system. You need to create constructive tension, and constructive tension is born out of there's clarity around what I need to deliver on a day-to-day basis, and I'm working towards that, and there's a clear contract of what the expectation is that I need to live up to at the end of the period, whether it's a quarter or a year. And when that expectation is met, there's a concomitant set of rewards that come through. That is super important. Without which there's expectation gaps, which cause confusion, which cause anxiety, and also which cause friction. And you turn something that could be a positive thing into a very destructive force in the business. So that I strongly believe. People want to know that they're working towards something. To the point I made earlier, those milestones need to be clearly defined. And if they're not, you surprise people in an unpleasant way. And that often doesn't have good results.
Go down well. Mm-hmm. I mean, you also talk about bold ambitions. And I think that Elon Musk, Google, DeepMind is around solving for intelligence. These are bold ambitions, and so how do you not get people overly excited or disillusioned by these bold ambitions? What's the remedy for the success?
Yeah, I mean it's a great question, Ralf, and I think it's one that you see play out, because once you set bold ambitions, you have to punctuate those bold ambitions with the executables. Like, what's the lived experience of aspiring to that bold ambition? I mean, think about this very ethos that we living towards as Googlers, which is organizing the world's information, making it universally accessible, and useful to everyone in the world. I mean, that's if there was ever a bolder ambition, I mean, that's it right there. Like the world's like. I mean, just think about it conceptually, organizing the world's information. And the best way to exemplify it is just take libraries and books in libraries, and take all of that and say, you are basically trying to do the sum total aggregation of all the libraries that are out there in the world and present it to people in one portal that will be useful to them, whatever their subject matter is and whatever research that they're conducting. That is something really special, right? And I think it's quite inspiring to just when you synthesize that. But to your point around how do you actually galvanize the entire organization towards that ambition, people need to see themselves in what they do on a day-to-day basis in that, right? Whether it's a developer who's writing a piece of code, they have to connect that to how it supports the ambition. And if you don't create that simplification of connecting the vision and the strategy with the executables, you won't achieve your bold ambition.
It's so funny you talk about this library for the world, but probably for the last little while now, I've been looking at AI agents, and I've been working with my 12-year-old stepson on this stuff, so he's probably more intelligent than I am, and he helps me and directs me. But so I've tried different things, and recently I was using my MacBook to set up an agent, and then I was talking to my head of IT about it, and he's like, because we've got Google, and he's like, no, just use Gemini. It's all on Gemini. Because I was trying to download our whole files, our Google files and my calendar and everything to the system, because I realized that as an organization, we need to do the same thing. We have pockets of information on Google files, but actually how accessible is it, and how can we integrate AI to find these opportunities? And it's exactly what you said. For me, accessing the intelligence of the whole company and allowing the opportunity of AI to assist us to unlock some of the information in that's our theme. And I was, I don't know, impressed. I was like, are you sure? Anyway, so last night I checked and I was asking Gemini, can you unlock my calendar? Can you go into my files? And it did. And so it started giving me reports. And this has been taking me probably a month to try and download and set up this stuff. So it is important. It's not just important. I think it's going to give a massive edge in terms of, like you said, clarity and access to information and helping the team to solve challenges.
Yeah, and what you describe kind of is probably a natural evolution from how we use it today. Like, most people almost discount the power of just using mapping technology to get from point A to point B. I mean, like, we use it every day. We're almost like assume it away. It's in the background now. I need to get, through all the traffic, etc. What's the most optimized route to get there? And that's productivity. That's you saving time, right? And then to your point around now creating your intelligent personal assistants, using, Gemini AI tools that can kind of collate all your bits and pieces that are lying all over the place and pull them into a cogent piece of information that's useful to you is extremely powerful. I use, like, I'll share with you. I prompted Gemini to roast me the other day. I said, given my digital presence and my digital footprint, what would you say if you were to roast me? What would you say is my personality archetype? I won't share that with you now. But,
we were waiting now.
Some of it was flattering and some of it was not so flattering. But you should try it sometime.
I wrote it down because this same 12-year-old, when I got married to his mother, he said he wanted to do a speech. I was like, what? He's 12-year-old. And so he says that there's got good things and a bad thing. So he said, what should I say first? So I said, no. I walked up there with him to help him. I said, the bad thing. So he said, the bad thing is I'm not going to roast I can't roast my mum today. In his mind, he has fun roasting his mum. His intelligence works like that. So it's interesting. We must laugh at ourselves. I think we got to also laugh at ourselves a bit and see that we're not perfect. I think about the story of you coming from Soweto, and I just can't imagine it. And then going to medical, and maybe everybody's proud of you for this deep achievement and coming from where you are, and then moving to Standard Bank and finding joy for yourself in it, and leaving medical, and then the phone call you get from Google to join them. How did that feel?
Yeah, it's profound in many ways, just in terms of the recognition, I guess, of it's a subtle way of just, and kind of appreciating being recognized that you've accomplished something, you've made an impact, a meaningful impact, for that matter. And if you kind of think of those inflection points, hindsight is 2020, as they say, right? imagined it that way at that point in time when I was going through a lot of challenges, because challenges there were. But I went through them, as a
Any
wise
that
man.
stood out?
Um,
So
so,
you thought, I'm not going to do this, not going to happen, or was there any that you doubted yourself?
so when I decided that medicine was not the right career of choice for me, for instance, as an example, that brought up a lot of disappointment, the emotions of deep disappointment from my family, particularly, because in those days you were either a teacher, a cop, or
Or a lawyer?
a lawyer. so, and having been good at sort of like your life sciences at high school, it was like, what's the problem? I mean, like, this is just the logical, next progression for you. What's your story here? My dad was he was a very smart person who was kind of just not given the right opportunities, and so whenever he always used to inculcate in us the need to seize the moment, seize opportunities. We work hard, but also make sure that you seize opportunities, which is something I still carry till this day. Because they don't come around often, right? When I think about how he worked for a mining company, but he worked in their labs. He basically never had a matric certificate. In those days, I think they finished like in JC, like this would be like standard 8 or grade 10 in today's terminology. And he just worked himself up. And working as a lab technician with the standard 8 was a big accomplishment for him, because he was kind of in the scientific discovery space. So when mining was still booming in those days, right? You could almost say, given the right platform and opportunities, he would have been a scientist in his own right, because he just had that kind of wiring. And so when I look back at that, and what he always used to say is like, I never had the opportunities that I'm creating for you. So seize the moment, seize the opportunities, and work hard for it. His favorite line was, luck happens where opportunity meets hard work. As cliche as it may sound, he always used to say, guys, you'll be lucky when you work hard and you seize the opportunity, right? And most of my siblings have done exactly that. I've unfortunately, one of my brothers is late, but
I'm sorry about that.
Six siblings, and all of us really, I think he would be super proud wherever he is. He's late now. Unfortunately,
I'm sure he is most certainly super proud. How is that telling him you're dropping out? How is that like?
Oh no, that's if there was ever a conversation that I would never repeat ever, care to repeat ever in my life, that was it. And parenting, I guess, was different. Like in the in the sort of 80s and 70s, parenting was a different ballgame. So it's quite hard to parent these days without the levers that parents had on us before that, corporal punishment and all these things that come with parenting of old versus the parenting of influence that we have to apply these days. Different ballgame.
Influence.
So I
Influencers.
Yeah. I thought I was going to get seriously murdered. He was so angry with me. He was so disappointed. But at a point, he actually just, I think he made peace with that, and he almost was apologetically saying to me, keep going, type of thing. Yeah, you'll find your swing, and that I appreciated.
Yeah, it means a lot, eh? So, I mean, if you look back now at your journey, you think about other leaders who are coming through or young people who are coming through. What are the attributes you think you either look for or you suggest people who are wanting a career like yours should be adopting?
It's such an important question, Ralph. In today's world of instant gratification, right?
Mm.
Instant everything is kind of
Mm.
like supercharged, on sort of hyperdrive. People want, they hail things, they get things at the touch of a button. And one of the things that I see a lot, particularly with the youth that are coming through the job market, whether they come through as entrepreneurs, etc., is just the tenacity, the staying power, right? I think it's something that I look for, and it's not abundantly there in these days. They place little value in kind of doing the hard yards, the proverbial mailing room
Mm.
conversations from the mailing room. It's a very difficult conversation to have with youth today, right? So that's
Starting
one
at the
of the,
bottom.
yeah,
Starting at the bottom, starting as a cashier at Standard Bank,
yeah,
working at Eskom, so it's those opportunities that are snubbed at or overlooked. But isn't it almost like understanding the knitting, the basics of work and how people operate?
yes, yes, and so you learn those lessons when you start from the bottom. Because it also teaches you something that's super important for leadership, which is humility. Knowing when, knowing when
Mm.
to dial down, versus when to dial it up, so that you can connect with people. So those are some of the traits I look for. So staying power, the tenacity, the humility with which people approach learning opportunities, because again, one of the things I say to my fellow colleagues and staff is, being able to have the sense of flowing like water. Whenever you meet obstacles, how do you navigate? How do you keep flowing, right?
Mm.
But those obstacles are there for a reason, and they're there to punctuate and teach you lessons that you're almost like you're flowing, but you're collecting all these lessons, and before you know it, you've almost got like a tidal swirl, right?
Yeah.
Come almost like a tsunami of your own. I think that's something that I find is very hard to find these days, and you almost have to, teach people and gender it in how they navigate their careers. It ladders up, You don't just kind of wake up as an overnight success.
I mean, you spoke about having an open mind about meeting people. Is anyone that surprised you? I mean, I was thinking of the people maybe from Deep Minds who inspired you, but is there anyone that surprised you that you've met?
I met Satya Nadella when I was at Microsoft, and the surprise for me was how he could kind of just, move from the most minuscule, umpteenth level of detail and go deep in tech, and then elevate into strategic level conversations. I was just in awe of how deep and and also how strategic it can be at almost the same time in one sentence, right? And I think it just takes something really extra special to be able to do that. I see that a lot in sort of maybe the archetype, I'd say, in the global tech CEOs. John Chambers, for instance, at Cisco, back in the day, was the same way. I mean, we called him the professor because he could kind of go like, level 50 deep and then go level 600 high on any concept, and it was just mind-boggling how these people do that. But it comes also with, I mean, you asked me a question about being surprised. I was surprised pleasantly with some of those interactions. And they've also kind of stayed with me in the sense of, I should never stop learning. That's how I kind of received that. I interpreted that. They spend quite a bit of time making sure that, you know, they sharpen and hone their craft, and they're continuously learning, which is why I said to you earlier, how I've now, let's call it, surmised it, is just getting uncomfortable with being comfortable.
I so embrace that thinking. And so what is on the horizon that is uncomfortable that we should be looking at? Because AI was that. And is it quantum computing? I'm trying to work it out, because, you know, Elon Musk talks about look at something that's 10 years out and try and understand it. Is it quantum computing 5 years out? Is it 10 years out? Is that the new thing that we all should be looking at and understanding? Or should we be focusing more still on the opportunities that AI has?
I think there's still a lot more that AI still needs to deliver on. I think when we get to, and we're probably about 2 or 3 years out, you know, from what the experts say.
Yeah.
I don't consider myself to be one of them. You know, I listen to them as well. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I know what's going through your mind right now.
I'm like, this is my question to you. The first one is, what would you say is your ultimate expertise? Because I think without a shadow of a doubt, you're an expert, and there's no doubt in my mind. It's just, what do you think your expertise is, more than, are you an expert? Because you have done some phenomenal things and worked with some phenomenal companies, and so, yeah, it's maybe that's a different question, isn't it? What do you think is your expertise?
Let me answer your first question. So I think AGI is going to be quite profound, you know, and more so people are starting to recognize that AGI, together with the combination of robotics, is kind of the next inflection point, right? We make light of the fact that you know, human spatial recognition, recognizing that you are 4 floors up, or 2 floors up, or you're on the ground, or you're lying down versus standing up. We make light of the complexity, the sophistication of our brains in computing that. We've cracked that code now. You know, when you see robots, robots kind of doing the moonwalk and the stuff that you see on social media.
Are you on the Africa Tech Week advisory board WhatsApp group? Did you see Clay put on I think it's from one of the conferences in the States, robotics, and I wasn't sure. I was like, is this AI generated? It's of robots, but they've got human faces. And I was thinking, I need to send this to someone to see if this is AI generated, because it's just ridiculous how these robotics are advancing.
Yeah, and that is kind of being spurred by artificial general intelligence, and when these models, these computational models, come of age, you will have robots that have the ability to reason. You know, they're already there. You know,
yeah.
It's just being fine tuned. So I think that's going to be a big shift, the next big shift. And I think also when you start to have quantum computing at commercial scale, it's just going to mess with Moore's law. Let's put it that way, right? You know, computational capacity is going to, accelerate in multiples more than what Moore's law says, I believe, with the combination of the two. So the constraints are about, right now, I think what we need to just solve for is energy. The availability of energy and power to drive compute. That seems to be the big preoccupation in unlocking the true power of AI and AGI. we see it. So I think I'm looking forward with a lot of excitement to what's going to unfold in that space.
We had will.i.am speak at Africa Tech Week. I think it was about almost 3 years ago now, and he actually spoke from the States, and we brought him on as a hologram, and it was a whole interesting episode. And I think he's a big investor in tech, and certainly a community-driven investor as well. And one of the things that he said at the time was that it's an opportunity for Africa in the next centuries to get involved, because AI is going to be a powerful force. And I think his message is really around some of the biases that come from AI if we don't get involved in the programming and the building of this, and especially from Africans' perspective. And he gave many, many examples. Do you think we're embracing AI from that building up perspective sufficiently in Africa? And how do corporates and organizations in Africa and South Africa embrace AI into their work better?
Yeah. So one of the preoccupations that we have, Ralf, as Google is exactly that. How do we make sure that Africa is a participant, active participant, as opposed to recipient, consumer, bystander, whatever, in this new revolution. And to that extent, the localization in terms of how we train the models, and also how we make sure that the models are representative from a language perspective, is one of the big pieces of work that we've been busy with. A project we call Waxel. There's over 2,000 languages across the continent, right?
Sure.
And even more in terms of dialects. Mm-hmm. Today, most models, when you prompt them for an image, they will give you a typical image, which is quite Western. It's not localized enough, So, and if you prompt it for an African image, it will give you the quintessential, typical African portrayal of Africa, right? And you know what that looks like.
Yeah.
Somewhere in between is kind of how we need to, help these models understand a lot more of the African context. And that's why we've been, working to do just that in terms of language proficiency, isiZulu, Afrikaans, et cetera, beyond English, and Swahili and Yoruba, et cetera, as some of the languages that we've worked on. There's over 11 languages now that have been kind of incorporated into the models that we work on in Gemini, and training Gemini also with sort of like video, imagery, etc., is helping to enrich, the accuracy with which they produce the outputs that we're looking for from an African context perspective. But beyond that, from an innovation perspective, when you are using these things to try to drive innovation, you want to make sure that innovation is representative and is contextually relevant to Africa. So that's why it's important. I mean, a project like Open Walls, for instance, is another project that kind of exemplifies it, where we're using AI to be able to create sort of geospatial mapping for informal settlements, so that people can get access to services, right? If you think about, taking for granted the fact that you got a PO number, postbox number, or a address, so when they send stuff to you, whether you're using e-hailing services or whatever, or you're just receiving, typical mail, and put that in an informal settlement, and being able to reach people with the right services at the right time is quite a challenge if people don't have a means of identifying their location. So this project is quite important to help from an urban planning point of view. And it couldn't have been possible without AI, because AI is able to help us to do very fast computations and track, also the development in informal settlements, and how urban town planners can help accelerate that. So yeah, I mean, to your question, there's a lot of work that's going into that. There's a lot of work going into making sure that also technologies like facial recognition, etc., do not have embedded biases, because while they may be useful technologies from a movement control perspective, from a safety and security, in terms of law enforcement, etc., they cannot, prejudice any one particular race just because the person who designed it doesn't understand, facial features of that.
And that is a real challenge. These are real challenges that we need to solve for as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I think of the community that we serve, and one of the things that I often hear them, the challenges that they face is, one is access to capital, other is access to markets, and the other one is access to talent. And yeah, I almost get the impression that Google, in many ways, is solving for all of these things, right? But so how do we educate entrepreneurs, and how do we educate young people more around some of the capabilities and opportunities coming out of Google?
So it's also one of the key things that we are focused on. So we believe there's three things that we need to do, and do really, really well, to really kind of unlock the AI opportunity for Africa. And to your point, skills and capacity development is a key focus area for us. I mean, we've trained, over the last three years, we've trained in excess of 7 million Africans on these technologies across the continent. But it's a drop in the ocean, just if you think about the population.
Billions.
Right? So there's a big job, a big task, and the same, by the way, is happening in other markets. In European markets, governments have actually sanctioned making sure that citizens get, and school kids, and these technologies as a competitive differentiator for that matter. So skills is one. The other one is just creating the ecosystem, making sure that we get the tools in the right hands in terms of developers who can then use them to solve real world problems. I mean, I gave you one or two examples earlier, projects we've been running from Google Research, but there's plenty more bright, young minds that are out there that are, using these technologies to solve challenges. I mean, one that comes to mind is just the multimodal interaction. One of the guys, the entrepreneurs that we worked with, was an entrepreneur. He was like a developer. He just saw a problem and he developed an application. And now it's actually becoming something that could commercialize and have commercial value. In building an AI model that's embedded into ATMs, multimodal AI agent that's embedded in ATMs. So you can talk to ATMs. Just think about how that bridges access to, financial transactions and engaging for people in deep rural who can talk to an ATM as opposed to trying to decode, language that they don't understand, right? So
clever minds there.
It's a simple thing. Like it's a very simple thing, but it's hugely impactful. So that's the second thing, working with entrepreneurs and kind of just building that ecosystem of by enabling people with our tools. And we've made Gemini Pro available for 1 year for free to students, and in that that we catalyze that innovation.
Wow.
And then third, which is probably the first thing I should have talked of, which is super important, which is critical infrastructure. Building critical infrastructure and investing in building critical infrastructure, because without which there's no access to these platforms and there's access to these technologies. And so when people see Google kind of investing in East and West Coast submarine cable systems and so on and so forth, they wonder, is Google a networking company? Yeah, I kind of in a way. we're solving a problem, because critical infrastructure is what's required for people to connect, and also to be able to access, this information at a global scale. And then critical infrastructure means also building localized regions and data centers for delivering these computational capabilities, and that's what we're doing, right? So systematically, these are the big sort of hairy, bold things that we're trying to do to catalyze in favor of Africa. But beyond that, there's a piece of this which is the wraparound, which is around how do you get government and academia and like-minded stakeholders to start to think about not legislating innovation away. So in other words, the proverbial knee-jerk reaction for government is put laws and constrain innovation and then kind of almost slowly dial it back. By the time you dial it back, the train has left the station, you're behind. So working with those stakeholders to make sure that whatever laws and legislation come up do not stifle innovation, but actually embrace innovation in a way that also makes sure that we mitigate against nefarious actors, which are always going to be there, whether in terms of cyber criminals or people who just kind of want to, game the system or manipulate well-intended technology. Beyond let's call it the very, very touchy subject of ethics in AI, which is an urgent debate right now. And how do you govern the use of these technologies? And we're engaging with academia, we're engaging with those stakeholders, NGOs, etc., NPOs, to figure it out. Right? At the core of it, we want AI to be AI for good as a business. So that that's the point of departure. How we make that so is the work that we have to put in.
I was going to say earlier, I asked you about partnerships, and it's clear the power of partnerships, and I was going to ask you what makes one. But Google is a partnership company, actually. And I see that, and so I was thinking for the audience, they probably want to partner you, or they want to have ideas of partnering you, and say, so what do you look for? Because they've probably got ideas or whatever, but what do you look for? What are the criteria when you're looking at partnerships? Because I think partnerships are the future. And like you said, working with government, working in academia, and I see that it's so important that all companies should be doing the same thing. There's a well-known saying from Salim Ismail: it's the greatest minds in any company sit outside that company, and you can get a lot from other people and customers. But on a final closing question, what makes a great partnership?
Yeah, partnerships have to be born out of. Let's call it, we look for, let's call it win-win situations with partnerships. There has to be joint risk and reward as far as partnerships are concerned. So we look for that, as opposed to the proverbial handout. I don't think Google is that kind of company. But we rally behind also, entities that can do things at scale. So scaled engagements is important. If you think about it in the context of our ambition, right? We can't be doing small little things. Most of the time we try and aggregate and create scale and then leverage that scale for, broad impact to society. That's another big, tenet around how we ideally prefer to partner. It doesn't mean that we shy away from, let's call it the small interventions, but we find mechanisms to aggregate for those smaller interventions. Like, for instance, the Google Academy for Startups, right, is aggregated through, NPOs and partners who do this at scale, but bringing on board, small startups, entrepreneurs, matching them with, VCs, PE guys, who can actually invest in making those businesses sustainable, or kind of, let's call it, recapitalize them to to grow to the next stage. Is kind of where we see this working and making more impact. And then I think partnerships also open up new opportunities. To your point around, accessing markets and accessing industries or areas that ordinarily we wouldn't be able to. And again, the equation of mutual gain and mutual risk comes into effect there, because through that we can then support ecosystem partners to then scale to even bigger objectives and bigger ideals. I think that's kind of typically how we approach partnering.
I think it's so important, that scaling and working with. Everybody's got their strengths and how to be productive and innovative. Kabelo, it's been amazing talking to you. Absolutely phenomenal, and hearing those insights and stories. Very, very grateful for this early Friday morning.
Thanks, Ralf, for being kind.
It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on board.